While the others were at the venue getting set up for the show, Wish and I had an early dinner in the hotel's restaurant. As we were waiting for the food to arrive, Wish sipped at her wine a little uncertainly and ventured, "Has Tommy given you my journal yet? He's supposed to be filling you in on matters psychic." I put my own drink down, clasped my hands on the table before me, and hunched my shoulders. I was nervous all over again. Yeah, he said you wanted me to read it, but I really didn't like the idea of invading your privacy like that. She arched an eyebrow delicately. "So you haven't looked at it yet?" I shook my head, feeling like a school kid all over again. "No, I thought about it, but I just couldn't do it without clearing things with you first. I tried to call you earlier on this afternoon to ask you about it, but all I got was your answering machine. I had no idea you were coming here." She smiled a little uncertainly. "Well, how about if I read it to you then? I mean, you need to know these things, Rain. You're very psychic, you know that, and we psychics need to band together." Now that sounded ominous. "Why? It's not like there's some great crying need to form a psychics union or something." I mean, even the psychic hotlines are considered to be jokes. Most of the people working them are the same class of con artists as gypsy storefront palm readers. She shook her head sadly. "It's nothing that mundane, believe me. I know this is going to sound melodramatic, Rain, but it's the God's honest truth. There are evil forces out there." I flashed back to Castevet on the beach in Malibu and the dream I'd had that night. A cold chill trickled down my spine. I tried not to let it show, but I don't think I was all that successful. "Out to get who? Me? You?" She shuddered faintly. "Yes, to all of that, and more. You, Tommy, Dad, me, everyone in our group, we're all at risk, and in ways you can't even imagine. There's more at risk here than just our lives. It goes far beyond mere life and death." That chill was back. The problem was, it wasn't just trickling down my spine, it was doing laps up and down it this time. She had my undivided attention, and she knew it. She pounded the matter home. "There is one particularly evil individual named Nicodemus." My stomach lurched, rolled over, and played dead right there on the spot. She saw my reaction and trailed off. I gulped hard and struggled to get my voice to work. It took some time. It took some doing, believe me. "Whoa, hold the phone. I ran into a real creep case by that name in Malibu a while back. Any chance we're talking about the same guy?" She locked eyes with me, somewhere beyond dead serious now. Dark hair, British accent, near white eyes. I nodded. "And as cold as ice. I don't think he was even human." She paled a little more. "What makes you say that?" I shook my head uncertainly. "A lot of things, if I wasn't imagining them. For starters, his aura was black. According to the Encyclopedia of the Paranormal, that color in a person's aura means death is about to take him, but there was nothing unhealthy about the way he looked or acted. And that aura felt unclean when it touched me, like maggots crawling on my skin. And he paralyzed Rocky just by touching him. And..." I trailed off. This last part sounded too far around the bend to be believed, even though it had happened to me. Wish prompted. "And?" I sighed. If anyone would believe me, it would be Wish. "And he walked across more than 100 yards of beach sand without leaving a single footprint in it anywhere." She was paler than ever. "That's him. Dad told me that you'd encountered him, but he didn't give me any details. We've been trying to pin him down for a long, long time, but until you met him and then talked to Dad, we didn't have anything but a first name on him. He may have made a serious mistake in giving you a last name. One of our people is trying to track down the name Nicodemus Castevet through the internet. It may lead us to his base of operations. If we can find it and neutralize it, we have a chance of defeating him. I shuddered. I can believe he needs to be stopped. I get the feeling he'd have given me the cold shivers even if I weren't psychic. And he treated Rocky like he didn't even matter at all, as if he were worth less than nothing. And that was living right next door to me. Even though I had no idea who or what he was, I kept getting these urges to get the hell out of there. When I got the offer to temp in the band here, those urges were one of the main factors that made me decide to take the offer. Getting away from Castevet makes even putting up with Tommy and Tony and Razor look good by comparison. At least most of the time. Lately, the three jerk stooges have been losing ground, and Castevet is starting to look better and better. She let out a startled giggle. The three jerk stooges? That's what I call them. Somehow I wasn't surprised. I gave her a crooked smile and murmured, "Two great minds with but a single thought," and all that. She giggled and sipped at her drink, eyes sparkling. When she showed no signs of speaking, I shrugged and admitted, "The funny thing is, I didn't even realize this until just now. Talking to you about it helped to bring it out into the open for me." She smiled a little. "It happens like that. It's all part of being psychic. Things tend to come out in unexpected ways for us." The food arrived about that time. We dug into it, grateful for the distraction. But after a few bites, I had to ask, just who is this creepshow character, Castevet, anyway? She smiled grimly, shook her head a little, glanced around at the others in our immediate vicinity pointedly, and lowered her voice enough to keep from being overheard. "That's a little hard to explain. On the surface of things, he's Dad's nemesis. Dad's been doing battle with him for as long as I can remember. On a deeper level, I suppose you could think of him as a demon at large in the mortal world, a supernatural creature that disguises itself as a human being so that it can work its evil from within the framework of human society, and thereby more readily catch people in its snares unawares. He's a kind of psychic vampire. He drains energy from people to sustain himself and uses that power to cause just as much harm as he can to innocents. He and others like him have been behind every major human tragedy in recorded history. Wars, plagues, disasters of all sorts. The more suffering he causes, the better he likes it. Dad is certain that the individual we know as Nick, or Nicodemus, was responsible for the Chicago fire, the Hindenburg disaster, the sinking of the Titanic, and the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand that touched off World War I. He also suspects that he was the one who drove Hitler, Mussolini, and Hirohito mad enough to set World War II in motion. More recently, we suspect his hand in things like the Charles Manson affair and the Reverend Jim Jones tragedy in Guyana. The problem is, knowing that Nick and his kind are loose on the world and being able to do anything to stop them are usually two entirely different matters. These demons in the flesh are crafty and slippery. Pinning them down is like trying to catch a greased pig, and even after you've managed to corner them, they're immensely dangerous unless you can somehow defang them first. That's why we're trying to find his base of operations. If we can put it out of commission, we have a chance of stopping him for ages to come. But if we can't, she shuddered detectively, we could pay for our failure in ways that you can't even imagine yet. Shakespeare had it right when he said that there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophies. This was getting both of us way too upset, so I changed the subject to something a little less grim. What say we get on to something a little more pleasant? For instance, I like the idea of you reading your journal to me. That way you can do whatever editing you feel is necessary. And besides, it'll assure that you stay around here for a while, I thought to myself. She smiled almost blindingly, obviously grateful for the turn of conversation. If she caught the thought behind the suggestion, she showed no signs of it. Okay, we can get to that later. Are you performing tonight? I grimaced. To be honest, at this point I could take it or leave it, but I did sign on to do a job. She smiled sympathetically. The three jerk stooges have been getting on your nerves? Ah, you guessed. My tone had enough irony in it to classify as heavy metal. Between Tommy, Tony, and Razor, I'm about to do something really uncouth to someone. I remember coming across a sticker somewhere that read, "Stress, the confusion caused by your conscience overriding the urge to strangle some jerk who really, really needs it." At this point, my stress levels are approaching the stratosphere, and I'm having to fight off the urge to strangle all three of them, or at least break their heads a little. She giggled. Not surprising. Personally, I've been trying to avoid Razor for 2 years. My expression went a little sour. I take it you've already had the displeasure of meeting him. She nodded glumly. Unfortunately. When he joined the band 2 years ago, he saw a picture of me in Tommy's wallet, and he's been trying to get Tommy to introduce us ever since. When he knew me in England, I was just a little girl and nothing to interest him. But since I've grown up, that part of things has changed drastically. Razor's only notion of how to treat women is to use them up for his own pleasure and then throw them away. And I'm not about to be treated like that, even a little bit. I used to tour with the band from time to time just to spend time with Tommy. But since Razor showed up, I've been avoiding the entire scene. Unfortunately, my luck gave out today. I ran into him in the lobby, and I had to do something drastic in order to avoid him. Back when I knew him in England, he was just so rude and crude and crass that I wanted to smack him every time I turned around. He's gotten no better in the time since. And Tommy just laughs his behavior off. I expect much better behavior from Tommy because I know he was raised better than that. She clenched her hand so hard that the fork in it bent. She might have looked delicate and helpless, but that would have told me otherwise even if I hadn't been psychic. She finally realized the damage she'd done to the cutlery, oopsed prettily, and straightened it back out on the spot. A little red-faced, she murmured, "I'm sorry. It's just that mannerless, deliberately offensive people like Razor anger and offend me deeply. But Tommy's insensitivity cuts a lot deeper because he's my own brother." She shook her head. The fury in her eyes almost made them glow. I'm kind of glad they didn't actually emit any light. As unsettled as I was feeling just then, if they had actually given off any kind of visible glow, it might have brought unwanted attention to us. She seemed to be such a gentle, placid individual by nature. Finding her on the verge of committing mayhem, even if it were to a pile of compost like Razor, was disconcerting to say the least. Maybe I should have tried to talk it out with her, but I didn't know her all that well yet. For that reason, I decided it would be best to try changing the subject again. After all, I didn't want to risk fanning the flames any further and having those glowing eyes aimed at me. I kept getting an uncomfortable feeling that if they actually burst into flames, being that close to her might get me incinerated in my socks. So, very hesitantly, I asked, "Well, I've got a lot to ask you about, if you don't mind. Oh, wonderful Sanders. That old faithful standby of nervous little kids who don't have a clue about life or what it is to be cool. Surely you can do better than that." I struggled on gamely. "What if we went over your journal?" There you go again. Come on, Sanders, get it together already. "In my room? Oh, geez, now I'm blushing." It didn't seem to bother her in the least. Softly she murmured, "Sure, to hell with those jerks."